this computer. Right, we are recording. Okay, so going through the essay, we're looking at the forms or genres, and we need to work out how we can find the facts and figures, information, quotes from reviews and articles about the shows, why they're successful, why they're popular, and we want to get away from just describing what the shows are, but also being really analytical about why they happen. So this week, we definitely need to know what type of show form or genre you want to choose. And by next week, I want you to have a go at writing up your introduction about the basic facts of the show, when they were written, who wrote it, when did it premiere, etc. So we're going to practice that in this afternoon session in the second video. And we need to think, okay, which shows really demonstrate perhaps the earliest version of this type, and then a more recent version, which is a good contrast. Or if you're doing a type like jukebox, there are two types of jukebox musicals. You want type A and type B to demonstrate that, and we'll practice this as we go. We looked at some of these slides last week, but just to go through, and you can pause these to read more quickly. So yeah, we need to write a 250-word introduction during the next week, and you can email it to me, or we can get it to me later on, depending on the technology issues. You need to say what the essay will cover, i.e. the essay will research into, or will investigate the development of the so-and-so musical. Try to write in third person. That means writing about this and it, the musical, rather than I am doing this and I think this and I will find out this. We know it's written by somebody, but we want to be really academic, like a magazine article or a newspaper saying the facts show, or the data shows, or the research into popular pop music at the time shows that the Beatles are very popular because they had so and so many hits, or this show was created by Elton John, etc. So don't say about you, it's not about you, it's about the show. So always try and write with this essay, or this show, etc. We need to know when it was first invented, so which decade was this form, like the book musical or the jazz era, etc. And also what the general key features are. What are the main things? Why was this type of show really groundbreaking or important at that time? What did it do new that other shows didn't do? And then you just need to state this type of show and the two shows or examples that I say that you've chosen, plus whoever's written it, and other dates and details, like when it was premiered in the UK, perhaps West End, and when it was premiered on Broadway in the US. And the final thing in your 250 words is to summarize the show plot in one sentence. We did have a quick practice last week on that. So one sentence, we don't need lots of biographical detail of the composers, and we don't need lots of story detail, just a very brief synopsis. So those key things, these 6 bullet points, really are the things you need to write in your intro, okay? And if you can get your intro written in the next week and send it to me, then you know that I can check it through, and we're well on the way then to starting your essays. Okay, just to remind us what we've looked at, I recommend we look at perhaps the jazz era onwards, so early movie musicals with Fred Astaire, definitely the book musicals, the rock musicals in the 60s and the 70s of concept musicals, and then today, last week we looked at mega musicals. This week we're looking at the last 3, jukebox, new types of concept shows, and Disney as well. And also new movie musicals and stage adaptations. So you can choose any of those concepts. I'd avoid the opera stuff unless you're really passionate about it. Okay. You might also think about which composers you're interested in, and if so, aim for them and think, okay, what shows do they do? And then how can I research them and which shows do they fit into? And as we write about the shows, we also need to work out how they fit in to these 4 words at the top, how they fit into society, how they fit into the politics of what was happening in the day, what was happening during the world at that time, and were there any race or cultural factors which meant things did happen or didn't happen, or was there controversy over racism, etc., or was it a positive thing to do with anti-racism? What style of music is the show? So you need to listen to the soundtrack, you need to watch clips on YouTube, and be able to describe what instruments you hear. Is it an opera with an orchestra? Is it a classical? Does it have classical music like Les Mis? Is it more rock? Is it a rap show, etc.? What happened at the time the shows were written, or were the shows based around a particular world event? Like, were they written about the Second World War, even though they were written in the 80s, or was it Miss Saigon, written in the 80s and the 90s, but about the 1970s with Vietnam? Or is it about a personal story of somebody that was a true story or a made-up story? How did it then go from the West End to Broadway, or Broadway to the West End? And did it tour, etc.? And is it available for other people to play? And again, we're looking at world culture or globalization. So, yeah, is there a particular religion or a particular culture, like Eastern culture, Indian, African, Jewish, American? Is it atheist, i.e., no particular religion at all, or does it matter in that fact? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so everything, how the musical fits into the world around it. That's what your essay is going to be about generally. We can also look at all the things we talked about. If you read through this list, the way the structure is put together, is it narrative, i.e. a storytelling one, or is it like sometimes non-linear, where he makes up different ways to structure it? What can we look at in the storyline? How is it put together? Is it a combination of characters? Is it a combination of different ideas? How are words used? How is the music used? You can have things like Spring Awakening, which is set in the Victorian period in Germany, yet it uses up-to-date rock music with handheld microphones. Look and listen to the instrumentation, read your piano vocal music, have a listen to the music. What does the music actually do? What do the lyrics actually do? Can you say, oh yeah, that sounds a bit like that other show, or that composer, or that pop song? What did the audience think of it? What did the critics think of it? How many ticket sales does it sell on average per week if it's still running? Today we'll be looking at production. What elements of the choreography, the costume, the staging, the visual effects, etc., and the props, what sort of thing makes it very special, especially if it's come from something like an animation where you've got to turn something from an animation into a stage show. So when you start looking in detail about these shows, they're all the things you can think, okay, can I tick that off? Have I talked about that? Have I talked about that? Have I talked about that? I know I'm zipping through these, but they'll all help. So here's your general structure, and we'll go through it next week in more detail as well. The introduction talks about who we're looking at. The main part of the essay says this is where it fits into society, and we can then analyse the features, and you can have a conclusion. And this analysis of features, if you're doing jukebox, you can say here are two types of jukebox musicals, A and B, and that would fit into there. But you can say, okay, why does a jukebox musical really work, etc., and that will all be in there as well. So we'll go through individually how many words for this section a bit later on, but that's the general structure. Okay, we briefly talked about primary research. We don't need any primary research, i.e. you don't need to go and interview people, you don't need to do surveys. Yes, you should watch live performances or videos. I actually watched The Little Mermaid fully for the first time this year ever, which I know sounds shocking because most people have seen it like a million times. But I also watched The Princess and the Frog and The Last 5 Years, all free on various streaming services. You can also sing and perform it, which is why we're doing those little song challenges. So the key one there is watch the shows to listen to it. And we also looked at all the different things you can get information from. So you can pause this and read through this list. Anything like this will give you facts and figures. It'll also give you opinions like quotes from newspaper reviews, which are really important. Always try and think about is this person giving a quote really important? Have they published it in a book? Is it in a newspaper? Is it on a website that's all about musical theatre? Do not go to TripAdvisor and find a random quote for somebody who happened to watch Mamma Mia and really loved it, but is not really a musical theatre aficionado. Okay, have a chat with tutors if they've seen it or been in shows, etc. But always try and find reliable quotes from people, good and bad quotes. And again, always try and write in third person, where you say this show was written by so-and-so, rather than I think that this is important because. Okay. Titles, I'm very happy to be flexible. We can discuss them as we go. Something like the development of the book musical is nice and simple, or an investigation into jukebox musicals, or how Showboat changed musical theatre, or how this form changed musical theatre. Sometimes you can have a little phrase and an exclamation. Hey, Mr. Producer, the rise of Cameron Mackintosh, or pushing the boundaries, the development of the rock musical, or something catchy like the sound of musicals, the influence of Rodgers and Hammerstein. So a little quirky title, and then featuring on the form. That one's more about Cameron Mackintosh, obviously, but the form is what we're looking at. Okay, rock, or the book, musicals, etc. Okay, key things to think about. This isn't not for right now, but as we do. When you're looking at, try and find a variety of quotes. You can find negative quotes if some reviewers didn't like it and other people did. How many shows did it or years did it run for? The website IBDB, which we briefly looked at, gives you lots of stats, ticket sales and audience sales for every week, forever, for American shows. A bit harder to find the UK versions of that, but there are some online. How can you show this is successful? Generally, the idea is that if something is showing a constant selling out of all their shows, you know it's obviously going to be a success, which is very helpful. And then also, as we do today, look at these creative features of your show types and say why these were new or important, i.e., this is a great way of translating an animation to the stage because they did this, this, and this. And again, you can have appendices, which can include photos, sheet music, lyrics, anything that's not just a printout of a website. So something that's useful that you really want to highlight. So you could have a lyrics, some Sondheim songs, and you can highlight them saying, this is a really important lyric because it shows how good he is with rhyme or alliteration, etc. Okay, the next thing to take on board is what I call judgment topic impact. So how well did it do, which is the judgment, or how important it was. What are we talking about generally, the topic, and what was the impact it had on everything else? So you could say, or the other way around, topic, judgment, impact. This topic was great or important because, and it did this. So a musical that combined acting, singing, and dancing proved more popular with the audiences than just a song and dance routine. Quote from Smith. And that's a paraphrased quote written in my own words because I haven't put speech marks on. A variety of integrated disciplines would lead to a better telling of the story and character development. Or you could rearrange that into a quote with speech marks. Smith, 2013, states that a musical combining acting, singing, etc., etc. So if you want to quote something word for word, then put it in speech marks, or you can write it in your own language, but you must say that idea has come from this source. And don't say, I think this is important because. You just need to write, this is important because, or this information shows that. Okay, avoid the I thinks. So we do need to include these quotes in your essays and also reference them. Okay, that's the first bit about the research. I'm going to pause the video now and come back to it later.